I am. Yeah, Darrell, please don't get no car accident. I'm recording this for you as well. So yeah, everything that we are and eat and steward, whether it's a plant or an animal, is dependent upon the soil beneath our feet. And I think a lot of times that is overlooked. I know I personally overlooked that until about 2010 is when I really got serious. And then I got rid of my tiller in 2013 and never looked back. And that has been one of the most important things that I've done for my soil health on my farm, is utilizing cover crops, plants, and animals and fire to actually cut down on inputs, pesticides, chemical inputs. And it's really improved the overall health of our farm. And we also incorporate a wildlife habitat area as well. And I use those birds and good bugs that have come to live here in the past decade as my little army to do my bidding and take care of my plants as well. So let's see. Oh, I'm going to look at the chat. I think Dewey said, oh, Dewey, talk a little bit about your plan. We have a few minutes before Lisa is due to start. So you have a wide variety of things that you guys are planning for. So tell me a little bit about the pastures and your plans for, you know, dairy, beef, ruminants, diversified.
Well, we're not necessarily doing dairy or beef now, but yet we are, because so when we purchased the farm, it came with a guy who we're the third people that have owned it, that he has ran cattle on the farm. But he's very conventional. So we have about 14 acres of pastures that need a lot of TLC, tender loving care, because they have not been taken care of. I mean, he lets the cattle go wherever he wants. And so I've struggled to find, and understand how to take care of them and find people that do things that don't just want to spray chemicals and put down other chemicals and do stuff like that. So slowly but surely we're heading that direction. We are redoing all of the fencing. At some point in the future, when Barbara tells me we're going to do something that looks like either goats or sheep out there, or maybe cattle, I don't know. I'll wait to figure that one out. Right now, I'm moving. I got a chicken wagon that I built that can hold up to 80 chickens in it, and it's on a set of running gear, and we move it around once a week. I move it every 3 or 4 days internal to the fencing, but I move it once. We move it once a week, only because we have predators out here, and so I have an electric fence around it for the laying chickens right now. And then I'm building chicken tractors that I'll move around to eat various things, to include the. Hopefully, I'll get to the point where I can move them around wherever the cattle are and eat the larvae and stuff out of their poop, so that it doesn't turn into flies.
Yeah, and it'll cut down on your smell too. I move turkeys with my pigs and geese and ducks with my goats, and my farm does not smell like a pig farm because of that. That's the best thing you can do, is mixing up different kinds of livestock.
I agree with your statement. I just agree with your statement. I mean, just understanding the soil.
Somebody needs to mute.
But understanding and trying to understand the soil and how to take care of it is been a heck of a struggle.
There's someone on their phone and on their computer.
Okay.
Why? Well, you guys are matched with a great person to kind of guide you along through that. Courtney and Cricket that you're matched with Crick Hollow Farm, have been doing chicken and ruminants for, gosh, I think Cricket's been doing it for 30 years plus, and Courtney about 20. So they're great. Let's see. I don't think that Lisa's on yet. Jenny, I'm curious about your strategy for fruit and berries.
So my strategy was, there was a couple of blueberry bushes that were there when we had when we bought the house, and so it started there, and then I added like I doubled it and then I just tripled it again, like about a year or two ago. And then behind there was like, okay, well, I'll put raspberries back there. And it sort of went from raspberries to mulberries to a few other berry types. And so it's all a semi-shaded area, so it's not very good for like vegetables. And so I like it was like optimum for the berries if it gives them some shade during the summer, and it gave it something to be there. And then elsewhere I've got kiwi berries, and we got a big old trellis on there. And I am really hopeful we'll get flowers and berries this year. The past few years we hadn't, but now they're actually getting the care they need. And I actually did a soil test on them. So we should actually understand what to be doing with them to help them. And then the fruit trees are on we're on a hill. We're literally off of hill court. And so we have a nice big hill. And so on the more hilly part, I have I have trees of apple, persimmon, pear, peach, apple, all the different types, about 3 rows kind of a thing going on there, and they're kind of staggered, which gives us a nice little buffer from the neighbor per se. So I'm kind of really looking forward to those maturing in the next 2 years. And then herbs are sort of scattered everywhere, kind of big. They're everywhere. I do not like to weed, so plant some more stuff. And I don't want to have to like around the pool. It is gonna be it just gets herbs, gets peas and beans. I'd much rather come out the pool and pick a pea than a weed. So that's my thought pattern on it all. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, don't make sure that you are, I'm sorry, I was focused on trying to make Lisa the co-host, and I didn't realize I was on mute. Yeah, just make sure your blueberries aren't too close to everything else, because they do have vastly different soil health needs, pH needs, and fertilization needs. You really don't need to do a whole lot with them other than keep the pH low. And you have to fertilize completely around the blueberry bushes, because if you only fertilize on one side, bizarrely enough, those roots won't take out and distribute it throughout the plant. It'll only make one side of the plant healthy. And over 23 years of growing, I've learned that the hard way, unfortunately. So don't make the silly mistakes that I did.
And why one of my sides is slightly stronger than the other, kind of a thing. I'm kind of lucky though that there isn't really any, there'll never be any vegetables or anything else near there, kind of a thing.
Well, if it's, you said that it's very shady in some of those areas, so you can always turn it into a salad bar. Unfortunately for blueberries, you actually have to fertilize pretty often.
Pretty regular, like year or something like that.
More than that, I would say every 3 months, check them out, check out your soil. Since Lisa is here, so Lisa is the soil scientist for the Million Acre Challenge, and she's located in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And the Million Acre Challenge is one of the Future Harvest was one of the founding partners of the Million Acre Challenge, and she runs the show over there. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and we can get started. Lisa, you should be able to share screen now.
Okay, thanks. I figured this is kind of an informal group, so we'll see if I actually need to share screen. I was going to kind of see what the group wants to talk about. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names. I know some of you have been on some of the programs we've run. So yeah, I'm Lisa. I am the research director for Future Harvest, and I manage the Future Harvest role in the Million Acre Challenge, which is a 6-organization collaborative that's focused on advancing soil health and regenerative agriculture throughout the Chesapeake region over the next decade. And I'm also formerly a vegetable farmer. So I have about a dozen, ran my own vegetable farm for about a dozen years, growing for farmers markets, CSA, restaurants, CSA. So that's kind of my background before studying soil science. So today, I'm just really here to listen to any questions that you have, any issues, anything that's unclear about how to manage soil health on your farms. I can go over the soil health principles and talk about some of the practices that you might want to use or that you're hearing about. Answer questions about how maybe they apply to your system. We could talk cover crops if you're interested in getting started with cover cropping. We could talk about equipment. So I guess if need be, I have some slides I could talk about soil testing or my experience with cover cropping as a grower, if that would be helpful. But I guess first I'm just interested to hear if anybody has questions or topics that they would like to talk about. So let me see in the chat here. Building soil volume without adding compost if the soil's already high in phosphate or phosphorus. Yeah, so in Maryland or well, really throughout the region, we have to be really careful with soils that are high in phosphorus because there's a big risk of that nutrient running off into the waterways and causing algal blooms and dead zones. In Maryland, it's very well regulated, and so if you get a soil test back and it shows that you're above a certain phosphorus threshold, then you're going to have to limit what kinds of fertilizers or amendments you use on your farm. And in many cases, that includes compost. And, you know, as sustainable farmers, we tend to think of compost as being, you know, all good. It's like a really important nutrient source and fertilizer. So it's terrible when it's restricted. So if you can't use compost, cover crops are really the best thing. And even if you can use compost, I still would recommend, you know, planning on incorporating cover cropping into your system. So cover cropping should be a part of your crop plan and be considered just as important as any of your cash crops. When you're thinking about the long-term productivity and sustainability of your soil resource, you have to be thinking about feeding it and making sure that you are giving back. You know, intensive vegetable production especially can be very extractive. We're asking the earth to just give and give. And cover cropping is our way of like nurturing and giving back. And there are so different cover crop species you can choose and mixtures you can choose. And it's helpful to think about what your goal is. Like Jenny was asking about building soil volume. So if your goal is just to add biomass to the soil, then you want to probably use a cover crop that has a grass in the mixture. And depending on the time of year, that could be a different grass. In the summer, you might want to use something with sorghum Sudan grass in it. Just creates a ton of green matter and biomass that's just going to feed the soil. And maybe mix it in with a legume like cowpeas to add nitrogen to the soil. And you can make it a three-way mix. You could add buckwheat. That's something that will flower and attract pollinators. You can get really fancy with the mixes, but thinking about doing at least 2 or 3 in a mix is a good idea to get a lot of different benefits from it. In the winter, you know, rye is what a lot of people use around here, and there's a reason. It's just creates a lot of growth over the winter. And can really just add a lot of organic matter to your soil. And I like to mix rye with a legume like a crimson clover. Austrian winter peas is a great one to add to that mix. You could do a brassica in there, like rapeseed. So a good way to think about cover crops, though, is to really think about what your goal is with them, because there's a lot of things you can achieve with a cover crop. You can break up soil compaction. You can fumigate the soil if you're having a problem with a particular pest or disease. It helps break up your crop rotation and add some diversity into the mix. So, yeah, we could definitely spend the whole time just talking about different cover crop mixtures. So I'll answer some of these other questions first, and then, if that's a topic you want to talk more about, we can talk more about that, or we can save that for, I think I'm here on the next one 2 weeks from now too. So we could definitely plan to spend like a whole session on that sometime as well. Recommendations for soil testing. So it kind of depends which state you're in. If you're in Maryland, you need to pick a lab that uses Malic 3 extraction. And so Waypoint Lab is a good one. Waypoint Analytics, I've used them for a really long time. Some people like to use AgroLab. That's like regional, very close and pretty inexpensive just for your basic nutrient testing and pH and organic matter. And that's really kind of the minimum that you want to test your soil for is macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and some micronutrients like calcium, magnesium, sulfur, boron, zinc, and copper. Nice set of micronutrients. And something important to note about those names, macronutrients are called macronutrients because those are the 3 nutrients that are needed in the highest volume for plants to grow. And micronutrients are just as important, but plants need them in smaller amounts. So they're called micro, not because they're less important, just because plants need less of them, but they all perform really important functions in the plant. So don't want to skip out on paying attention to your micronutrients. And pH, really important to know the pH range that the crops you're going to grow thrive at. Generally, it's 6.5 to 7 is optimal for many crops, but there are exceptions to that. And there's a handy chart that you can find online, and maybe I can pull it up at some point this evening. More back to labs though. So the Penn State lab is also very good. And so AgroLab, Waypoint, Penn State are 3 kind of popular ones that people in our region use. If you want to get fancier and do a soil health test that includes some things beyond the chemical nutrient testing that tell you more about the overall health of your soil, you can use the Cornell Soil Health Lab or what's the other one? There's another lab offering a soil health test. But those are they're pretty expensive. So the Cornell Soil Health Package is $110 per sample that you send in. So it can be really useful to look at and really interesting, but I would recommend starting off with more of the chemical nutrient testing, and then using other ways to determine your soil, like physical health and biological health, because there are things you can just go out into the field, observations you can make that can tell you the same thing. So some of those would be worm counts. You can go out and dig a square foot of soil and count how many worms you have in there, and that's a really good indicator of your soil, how biologically active your soil is. There's a slake test that kind of shows how well your soil is holding together when it's introduced to disturbance, when there's any disturbance like water. And basically it's just, you take compost soil, you put it in a strainer and some water and watch how quickly it falls apart. There's actually an app called the Slake app, and that's a visual tool that you can just use on your phone. You just basically point it at the soil and it can somehow read the aggregates. I'll admit I don't know exactly how that one works, but I've heard it's actually pretty accurate. Let's see, do soil pH meters actually work? I think they do. I think you just really need to make sure you're following the instructions. If there's any requirements for like soil moisture or anything, it may not be as accurate as doing a pH test through a lab. But I think it could give you kind of a clue of how your soil is doing. The advantage of going with a pH test through a lab, though, is that they're going to give you a recommendation for how much lime to use if you need it. And that's really important. That would be a little bit harder to calculate on your own. So, and honestly, the simple lab tests that are giving you the macronutrients, the micronutrients, and pH and organic matter are, I mean, they're like $10. Granted, you may need to do it from a couple of different areas of your farm, but still a very worthwhile investment when you think about how much money you're going to save by amending your soil properly and by having crops grow really vigorously and be really healthy. So that little bit of investment is definitely worthwhile. Let's see. Bad experience with purchasing mushroom compost. Went with a different organic provider this year. Already purchased a soil test. Let's see. So can you maybe give a little bit more detail? Did you go with an organic provider of mushroom compost or a different kind of compost entirely?
No, I decided not to go with mushroom compost. So I just went with soil, and it's from a local farm, but they don't use herbicides or pesticides. They don't spray. And so I'm really interested. I have the University of Delaware soil test ready, so that once it gets delivered, I can test it. But any other thoughts or recommendations before I would apply it that you would have?
So you're getting compost from a farm that's making compost on farm?
Yeah, exactly. And I make some on my own farm, but just not nearly enough to support my own garden and flower bed. So and the market garden. So I'm supplementing that with purchased compost.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to make enough compost to use to make enough as you might need throughout the season. I mean, if they're a commercial compost operation, they should have an analysis of their compost, and so I would ask for that. See if they have it. The lab tests for compost are pretty expensive. They're more expensive than a typical soil test, but I mean, like, I want to recommend it that you do that, but I also understand that it might not be very cost effective. So it's a little bit of a personal choice. There are some red flags with compost. Like if you get it and it has a really strong ammonia smell, and it's still just like really, really, really hot and steaming, then it could mean it hasn't really fully cooked yet. that it's not really fully finished compost, and you have to be really careful with it, applying it if you're going to plant right into it. So there is a risk of like burning your plants if the compost is, if there's a strong ammonia smell, be very.
Okay, thank you.
Can I chime in with I have a few suggestions,
Mhm.
if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so kind of going back to the pH meter question, there are really cheap pH and EC meters you can get. I've used Vivosun ones and they work quite well for like a year and then they break down, which is unfortunate, but they're really handy for testing potting soil and things like compost. I've checked the pH measures, and if you want, you can email me. I can send you the protocol that I use for testing. But in terms of pH, if you're doing soil or compost or whatever, it's always pretty much spot on with what I get when I send the same sample into a lab. So you could just test for that. I think the pH and the electrical conductivity are the two biggest things that can go wrong when you're applying compost. If the EC is really high, there's too many salts, and that's another way you could burn your plants. Even if it is fully cooked, it just might be too nutrient rich. The other thing, if the facility does not have, if the facility doesn't have a test to provide you with, I think it's I always forget if it's North Carolina or South Carolina State University. They do like $25 compost analysis, which is a lot cheaper than like, I think Penn State and other places have like $80, something crazy like that. So that's another possibility.
That's good to know. I didn't know about the North Carolina lab. The ones like Penn State or Woods End lab are very expensive.
Yeah. And one more thing on the pH. I've like for a while I had I was using sheep manure. It for some reason had a pH of 9, which I would never have expected from sheep manure, but our soil test values were creeping up from using it in the last farm I was working at. And eventually we tested that. And depending on what you're growing, especially if you're doing like prepping for blueberries or something, you might want to check the pH of the compost, because if the compost isn't quite done, the pH might be a little bit above 7 or even really, really high. So just another thing to check.
Yeah, I mean, all compost is not created equal. So there's just huge, huge differences depending on what feedstocks they're using to build the pile. And that can affect like the carbon to nitrogen ratio, which is important to, how it's going to enter the life cycle of your soil. And in some cases, we tend to rely on compost a lot as like a bulky organic matter in itself. But honestly, a safer way to use it, both for phosphorus risk and for some of the other risks, is consider it more of an activator. You don't need to spread 4 inches of compost across your beds. You don't need to like think you're going to build all your organic matter at once by just applying compost. Use it to activate the biology in your soil, and really growing cover crops, growing that organic matter in place while stimulating it with compost is really much more efficient when you think about like the way that you're moving nutrients around. But compost is great, but I think its greatest benefit is as a soil activator or stimulator. Now, if you're filling raised beds or something, it's a different situation if you have to grow in raised beds and you need a medium to grow in. But if that's the case, then you definitely want to test the compost. You don't want to just fill up like a whole wood-sided raised bed with untested compost. That's really risky. Let's see. Testing sites for northeastern North Carolina. Well, several of the labs, like Waypoint Analytics, is in Virginia. So they deal with a lot of like just a little more bit more southern soils from Maryland. Anyways, they're actually a good one to use. And there's another one that the name is escaping me. I'm gonna have to look it up. But they also have a lab in North Carolina. And there's North Carolina State. They should have, I think they have a testing lab as well. I'm gonna have to think about the other lab that I'm trying to remember. Let's see. Jenny's asking, is it worth the extra money to test for the micro test not included in standard soil test? Or yes, but less frequently, which might, if you mean the micronutrients, I think those are very important. That you should just include those as part of your regular soil testing package, pretty much whenever you sample. I mean, for nutrient management planning in Maryland, anyways, you only actually have to sample your soils every 3 years. So, you know, if you're thinking about it that way, it's not that much, and you're only doing it every few years. Those micronutrients are really important. There's certain nutrients like boron that they leach, so they don't stick around in the soil. You only need a tiny amount of it, but it's incredibly important for plant growth, especially root crops, things like beets. So boron helps carry the calcium through the plant. So it's kind of like it's like the delivery truck. And even though you only need it in like tiny amounts, if you don't have it, then your plants are gonna be hurting. So it's good to keep an eye on those micronutrients. I think they're really important. They all serve a very important function. Some are really important for helping the plant fight off pests and disease. And they're all necessary plant nutrients. So, and honestly, they only add like a couple bucks onto the test typically. Question about bricks testing. So bricks testing is basically testing the amount of sugars that are in the plant, and that can be used as an indicator of nutrient density of the plants. Yeah, I think there is some evidence that bricks is a good measure of nutrients and also flavor. So with most plants, you want a certain level of sweetness, but if you're going to test the bricks, you need to know what the baseline is. So it's not going to help you much if you don't have a basis for comparison. So you'd want to kind of familiarize yourself with what's a good bricks reading and what's not a good bricks reading for that particular type of crop. And then there could be a lot of variation depending on the time of year. So the amount of bricks or sugars that you're going to see in a carrot that's grown in the winter is going to be just vastly different from what you're going to see in the summer because they're a winter crop, but we tend to grow them throughout the year. So with bricks, I think context is really, really important, but still a really interesting tool. And there's people like Dan Kittredge at the Bionutrient Association that have done a lot of work in that area. So that would be someone to look up and see what you can find out about different vegetable crops and where you want to be seeing that bricks fall. And if anything I say, you know, if you have other questions, I kind of jumping around topics. So I want to make sure I'm not jumping too quickly and you're still left with questions. So feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, you know, if you want to hear more. mushroom compost can be high in salts. Yes, very, very true. So my thought with mushroom compost is you don't want to just apply mushroom compost year after year. It can be a really good amendment as as one tool, one source of organic matter and nutrients, but you kind of want to change things up. So you don't want to just keep adding it year after year, especially in a high tunnel or something where you're not getting any rain to flush those salts through the soil. Okay, so we have a question about steps to bringing a dilapidated pasture to a healthy and balanced soil. So I guess my first question is, are you going to continue raising livestock on that pasture? Is it a pasture that's still in use, or are you thinking about transitioning it to a different use? Okay, so it's the previous owners were maybe like continuously grazing it, not doing much kind of rotational grazing, maybe having the animals graze the ground.
So what it was like a ring pasture. It was yeah, I'm not a huge horse person anymore, but like they just used it to walk around. So it's like was never really raised for grazing either. It was literally just trampled and used for keeping horses on.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Horse pastures are often sometimes just like the most hard hit. They're used really, really rough. Not a lot of equine people practicing rotational grazing or anything. And actually, the property that I farmed on was similarly was a really overgrazed horse farm with really sandy soil. So I feel you there. Really, the best thing you can do is, well, test it, see if it needs to be limed to bring your pH up to a rate where it could support a good cover crop. And really, in almost every case across the board, if you are going onto a new piece of land and you have the luxury of a little bit of time before you feel like you need to be making money off of it, I would recommend a full year of cover cropping just to reinvigorate the soil biology in the field, start to crowd out any weeds that might be there, and just really like give it a good jump start on growing crops or grazing animals. But the crowding out weeds part is just can be incredibly helpful. If you go onto a new piece of land and you try to till it up or put it into production right away, your first couple years are going to be really rough battling weeds. So if you can grow a good cover crop first, I would always recommend that. And what the mixture is will depend a little bit on what window of time you have, and are there particular problems beyond beyond just wanting to build organic matter? Is there a particular problem you need to solve? Like, is it really compacted? In that case, it sounds like if it was just a lot of big, heavy horses trampling around on it continuously, it's probably going to be really compacted. So you want to think about growing a cover crop that includes something with a really like deep, robust root system. And that could be something with tillage radish in the mix, or rye cover crops put down a nice, really deep root system. So think about a mixture that includes something with a good taproot. Rapeseed is another one that has a good taproot. That's in the Brassica family. And a lot of biomass and weed building. Whenever there's horses involved, they've been grazing on a lot of weeds and then pooping out lots of weed seeds and kind of just probably a really big weed seed bank in the soil that's going to get exposed if you need to disturb it, like through tillage or anything. So yeah, first step, soil test, see if you need to adjust the pH, and then you know, a good solid, at least a season cover crops. And we can get
Thank you
into
so much.
that's one. Oh, sure. Yeah. And, you know, I'm always available. Like, this is what I do, part of what I do for Future Harvest. So, you know, when you get soil tests and you have questions about what it means, or you need next steps after that, you can always reach out to me, and I'll try to help you kind of step by step walk through the problems, because, you know, it's a lot to consider and absorb all at once. So, let's see. Jenny did a soil test for wood raised beds that had a good amount of compost, questioning if it should have been a saturated media test. What's the difference between the tests? Should I redo the test for the nutrient management plan? Well, so for the nutrient management plan, if you think it was 50% or more of like an imported media, then you would actually need to do the other test. Let's see, what's the difference in the tests? You know, that's one I'm not entirely sure of. I've actually never done a saturated media test myself, but I guess it's more like the one that they do for compost, and I think it probably has to do with the phosphorus and nitrogen availability in it. So
How do you figure out 50%? Like those beds are straight into the ground, but there's like wooden sides around it, kind of a thing. So I don't know how to like define like 50%.
Well, yeah, I mean, that may be an imperfect science that they're asking for there. You might just have to use your judgment. I mean, ultimately, you want to make sure that you know the nutrient content of the medium that you're growing in for your crop health. So, like, I would err on the side of getting it if you think it's pretty close. I mean, really just so that you know what you're going into the growing season with. Yeah. Sorry, I can't.
It's glad that
you
I'm
on
not
your-
the only one that I didn't know about the test. If you didn't know that much about it, it makes me feel less bad that I didn't know anything about it. So I'm good with this. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I mean, I can definitely try to get better answers for you about that but I don't want to raise the alarm of the nutrient management people unnecessarily either. So
Yeah, I'm gonna check with my husband, go look at the beds and look a little bit and see what we're thinking, kind of a thing, because it's been a couple of years since we built the beds to really, I don't remember how many gorilla carts I moved up there, kind of a thing.
No, have you
So.
continued to fill it with compost, or you filled it once and then
We filled it basically once, and like I'll top it off a little bit, like an inch maybe, but like there's some that don't even need it, and so I just don't mess with it.
Okay. See, I feel like if it's been a couple of years and you've been growing in it, then it's not just like, you know, the first year growing in a lot of imported material. Okay. be okay to just use a regular soil test. At some point, your growing medium kind of becomes regular soil. You know, if you're growing plants in it and there's all this biological activity happening, there's plant matter being added, there's root exudates like feeding the microbes that are breaking it down. It becomes like a little bit less of a separate media, you know?
Maybe I'm fine because it doesn't look like compost, like it looks like normal soil kind of a thing out there now.
Yeah.
It did come up a little bit high on the phosphate side of things, but looking back at the compost numbers, it was understandable how it got there real quickly.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Let me think more about that. See if I can, you know, offer anything more useful, but I think you might be okay based on that. And and conventionally or get something established that only have a lot of contract. We've asked for it, it's smaller than that in our area. If you want to plant alfalfa or a legume mix or turkey, you're established by sowing seeds by hand. So
Amy, I don't know if you are there, but I think Lisa just dropped.
Yeah, Lisa and I both have pretty terrible connections.
She's back.
Oh, she's back.
Oh,
Okay,
there she's
great.
back.
I thought it was just
Yeah.
me.
No, that's
Yeah,
why I was like,
I was worried. I thought it was me, and that was my question. I was like, oh no, the worst timing. Okay.
oh no, I live in the sticks. I don't have broadband internet. I use a hotspot, so it's really terrible. But
we feel your pain.
yeah, I know many here in the same boat. Let me see. Let me scroll back down through the chat. Thankfully, I didn't lose the chat. Sometimes, you know, when you lose your connection, then you lose the chat. But so, I mean, you can spread cover crop seed. You know, there's a backpack seed spreader that is totally doable on an acre. So have you seen those? It's like a cloth bag and then like a spinny thing at the bottom and a crank. And you put your seed in there and you basically just walk the field and you do it in kind of like a up and down, trying to go evenly spaced. And you kind of watch the pattern that the seed is spreading as you do that, so that you try to pace yourself so that you're getting just like good overlap back and forth across the field. And then to make sure you're getting even, then you want to do it the opposite way across the field. So you do kind of and that's totally doable for an acre. Really, it's totally doable for several acres. The trick there is you then want to make sure you have good seed to soil contact. So you either want to go over it with a cultipacker. So that's where if you don't have one, maybe a neighbor has one. You could also just till it in very, very lightly with your walk behind tractor, set on like a really shallow tillage, like just shallow, just kind of basically scuffing the surface so that it settles in there a little bit. The other trick would just be making sure you do it right before like a really good soaking rain that's going to like settle the soil in there, the seed in there. That works better for small seeded varieties than for big seeded varieties. A little harder for something like peas. Frost seeding is another way. Like if it, like right now is a perfect time of year for frost seeding because the soil is freezing and thawing, and it actually opens up and it allows the seed to like to fall. So you can seed now, and that combination with like frost and a good soaking rain is going to help that seed settle in. I used, rather than alfalfa, which can be hard to establish, I actually use Lespedeza, which is also in the legume family and is a perennial. So it fixes nitrogen, creates a lot of
How do you spell
biomass. Lespedeza. Lespedeza. I did a combination of Lespedeza and fescue because I had an area I wanted to build up soil health. I wanted like a semi-permanent kind of cover crop to just really to have it be a little more passive than other areas of my farm and help crowd out some perennial weeds that I was having trouble, be hard to get rid of. It takes a little bit of preparation though to seed that, and the same would be true of alfalfa. You're going to have to disturb the soil to do it. You're going to have to disc or till, and pay attention to the timing. So you want to do it. You really want to do it in the fall, late summer, early fall for those crops. Not something you can seed successfully in the spring.
I guess
So
yeah, we just moved here a little over a year ago. The first year we just let the same farmer who was using the field do it, rent it one more time while we were worrying about everything else. But I'm worried it'll just go to weeds. You never know when he's gonna harvest, and he just grows corn pretty much every year. So like last year he didn't harvest till like late November. So I need something for the spring.
for the spring.
Yeah, because I really don't want to run it another year and then it might be too late to get a fall crop established again. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in that case, if you could wait until like late in the spring till the soil warms up a bit, I would probably recommend doing a cover crop using sorghum Sudan grass and I don't know what else. What would be good? I would say cowpeas. Just a mixture that's mostly based on sorghum Sudan grass, and then let it grow. It's gonna produce a huge amount of biomass, and then let it winter kill. So it'll be there in the field. It'll be keeping the soil in place, and it'll have produced a ton of biomass. But just don't mow it or till it. Just let it winter kill and hold everything in place until you're ready to use it the next spring. It'll crowd out the weeds.
Is there anything that might work as also as hay? Because we may try cutting hay and we haven't decided about that yet, but something that would be good for hay. Because again, we probably won't use the field next year. We just kind of want to get something that'll last for a few years.
Overmix with grass should be good for hay. So I looked that up, and it's also the common term is Japanese bush clover. So
Cool. I'll look into that. And then one more question for you. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask, what was the name of the thing? You broke up a little bit when you were talking about like the cloth bag for spreading seed. What is that called?
It's just called like a backpack seed spreader.
Okay.
Does anyone here have experience with that? Amy Rose, have you ever used one of those?
I have not. I have a lot of volunteers that come to the farm, so we have extra hands all the time. So basically, I buy bulk seeds like 50 pounds at a time, and mix things around. Like I wrote something in the chat about Lespedeza because you were talking about that, and I love Lespedeza. And so I will mix that with like grasses and sorghum and trefoil, and I'll put that down if I'm going to move the goats into that area next, because it's great for prophylaxis for small ruminants and worms if you're rotating things properly. Like I'm not saying that it's a treatment for worms, not at all. That's about as misguided as saying that pumpkin seeds will treat your animals for worms, which I know that circulates the internet all the time. But I'll just mix them up depending on whether I'm going to move pigs into an area. And like for pigs, I like to do Austrian winter peas and turnips and radishes, because they'll all break up compacted soil, and you know how pigs are. But for ruminants, I will put down the Lespedeza and trefoil and grasses and sorghum and ryegrass a lot of the times too, but that's got to go on afterwards because it's allelopathic and it will prevent other seeds from sprouting. So you don't want to, you got to be strategic in that. But I just mix it up, and I will like send people into an area and have them just broadcast the seed by hand. I am low tech here.
Yeah, I mean, that totally works too. Like there's all kinds of spreaders, like grass spreaders that people use just for reseeding their grass. You definitely don't need anything fancy there. But if you're doing a really large area like acres, the backpack seed spreaders, it's a pretty good tool because it just throws it out in kind of an even pattern.
Yeah, I think scattering sounds good. I think I can figure that out. But then you mentioned tillage, like light tillage after seeding or before seeding. Well, I'll have to see what weeds come up. It's been the plot has been treated with herbicides for years, so I don't know how much weed pressure there will be, and whether we'll need to like thoroughly plow or till beforehand. But like once you get the seed down, do we just need to get seed soil contact? Like I've heard you can even just drag like a heavy box spring mattress or something across the field. But would you recommend tilling, or does it just depend on the crop, tilling it in?
Yeah, I mean, you just really want to achieve that good seed to soil contact. I mean, that's, you know, I don't know about a box spring. You want to, because that like drag the seed and you might end up with like an uneven amount of seed there. So a culture packer is like, it's a big metal roller with these little metal bumps on it. It rolls over the ground and it kind of pushes the seed to the soil. Just enough to push it enough so that it's got some good soil around it, so it doesn't dry out.
Okay.
Stuff like that. That's really what we're after. I mean, some people just go through and rake a little bit on the surface. I don't know, what else do people?
Barbara mentioned using a chain link fence.
Oh, chain link to like drag it.
I have done that.
One of
kind of like do for dragging off. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was. Dewey and I were one of the many courses or things we looked at on the internet recommended using a chain link fence to drag after you had seeded to help the seed make contact, and I think to also disrupt some of the grasses that you didn't want. I don't know.
Right, so it's kind of weeding, doing a little bit of cultivating and pressing in at the same time. I guess the other question is, you know, if you have a neighbor with equipment, what kind of equipment does he have? Does it make sense to just ensure that you're going to get a really good stand? You know, if that's available to you and it's not too expensive, I mean, it's great if you can ensure that you're going to get a really solid stand, because if you don't, you've invested time and seed, and like the result might not be that great, and then you've wasted an opportunity. So
yeah, we haven't been able to find anyone in our area who wants. I mean, we have one neighbor across the street who I haven't talked to. He's like kind of iffy on things, but I know he has a tiller and would probably be able to like till the field for us and prep, and then we could hand seed and stuff. But like the guy who's been farming it farms thousands and thousands of acres, and this was just one little thing, and I can't even hardly get a hold of him about what pesticides he used. So I also, somebody asked about what, you know, long-term persistent herbicides. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, sadly with herbicides, you just kind of got to start somewhere, want to make that transition away from them. The worry would be the herbicide resistant weeds. So
Yeah.
the weeds that come up maybe have built in some resistance, and those become super weeds. Barbara's got her hand up. Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, so that I was going to comment. I think that a lot of us who have smaller acreage and are trying to do sustainable agriculture versus what's now been termed conventional, which is actually newer than what we're all trying to go back to doing, have a hard time finding people that are willing to come out to do services on our property. I know that my husband has been working on trying to get our pastures lined for almost a whole year now, and finding somebody who's willing to do the small amount of acreage that we want done, which is 14 acres of pasture, is really difficult, you know, because we keep getting pushed to the bottom of the list because we're just not profitable for them to come out. And I have a feeling that Julie's running into the same issues.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Orange Madison, I don't know where you're located, but Orange Madison Co-op, I think Dewey was able to connect with somebody there that that finally is going to connect us with someone, but we are waiting to get the full results of our tests back. So we haven't had it done yet, but if I'm wrong, you can unmute and correct me, honey. So we're on a separate locations today. So
yeah, we're in northern Baltimore County. I don't know, where is the Orange Madison Co-op?
So that's down by us in Palmyra. So we are west of Richmond, Virginia. Okay. So that's probably not feasible for you, but I would check with the co-op and stuff. But he just kept digging because we were, you know, that's what we ran into last year. And then we're also paying almost double what the larger farms are paying because it's not cost effective for people to come out and do stuff for us because of our small size.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So some of the soil conservation districts have equipment for rent. So, and often it's actually more like for mid-scale sized farms. So, you know, can sometimes be used on smaller farms too, because that tends to be the size farm that isn't going to just buy equipment themselves. It becomes like, you know, cost prohibitive. So they'll have grain drills and spreaders and things like that that are better for kind of small to mid-scale size farms. So that's one possibility. The equipment is not spread out evenly across the state or the soil conservation districts. Different districts have different equipment available. Future Harvest, we've been trying to build up this resource on the website, a tool share website, and that would be more like for this scale for farmers to list when they have equipment that they're willing to lend or rent or offer custom operation of. So, you know, a farmer that's willing to go to a farm that's within a certain distance of them and offer that service for a fee. So hopefully that resource will build up more and start to alleviate that problem. There is some equipment on there now, so maybe worth taking a look depending on where you are. Maybe you'll find something. And then of course the beginner farmer training program listserv. A lot of farmers that have been through the program before, if you put a call out there and say, I'm in this county and I'm willing to pay you to come line my field, you don't know. There might be someone on there that was in your shoes not that long ago that's willing to do that.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome.
So many good questions. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Okay, wait. Oh gosh, I just saw
Yeah.
Barbara's comment about we've been finding all the same surprises all over our farm. About the old trash dump fence portion. Oh my goodness. So wait, you got, or I ran to the bathroom while y'all were talking, and so the question that Julia and I had, did you guys answer that about how long the herbicides will persist in the soil?
Oh, yeah, we were kind of just talking about that. Different herbicides persist for different amounts of time. Basically, some are more photosensitive and like will be gone. Like exposure to light and air will degrade them really quickly, and a lot of them will leach into the soil. But what I was saying is, what I'd be more concerned about is those herbicide-resistant weeds that may have adapted from like long-term use of herbicide. There's a possibility you could run into some of that, in which case you're just going to want to really make sure to either hand pull them out whenever possible, or mow them, or do whatever you can to make sure they don't go to seed again. Walk the field. Like if you see pigweed out there,
Oh no, that's terrible.
like just do everything in your power to make sure it doesn't go to seed. Barbara?
So Dewey and I were lucky enough to get into a program through Michigan State also. So some of the stuff that I'm learning from them is via that. And one of the guys who helps you with advising on pollinator habitat recommended, mow it really, really short. He then said to spray it with herbicide, but, we're not doing that. But if you mow it really, really short and then plant soybean, that, because the soybean is, air quotes, weed resistant or Roundup resistant, that it will pull a lot of that pesticide out of the soil for you. And then you can, till the soybean under, put those nutrients back into the soil and then plant into it the next year. That was a recommendation that we got in one of the other programs that we've been lucky enough to be able to participate in.
That
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get the farmer on the phone and ask about if there is anything that's really persistent and awful, then maybe that's like our only option. But that's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, you have to figure, and I'm not an herbicide expert because like you guys, I was farming organically. So I didn't have to worry about it a whole lot, but if they persisted for too long, then farmers wouldn't keep applying them. So part of that is that they've built up resistance, but I think that they move through the soil profile. They're not just sitting there in that top 6 inches of the soil or a couple inches of the soil where they first landed. They are leaching through the soil, and they're degrading because of air and light, and so that's a blessing and a curse, I guess. Let's see, a recommended site or a book on identifying the various forage in pastures. I don't, but that's a really good question.
Hey, sorry to jump in there. So Dewey,
Please.
if you, I don't know about Louisa, but if you go to the Goochland County, I know it's not far from y'all. If you go to the Goochland County Soil and Water Conservation District, there's a woman there named Betty McQueen, and no one ever goes in there. And she will give you like an actual book of all of the native forage plants that are in, or that should be in a healthy pasture in our region. She sent me out of there with 3 copy paper books, or the big copy paper boxes full of educational materials when I went to go see her last.
All over it now.
Haha, awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say for anyone in Maryland or other states, I mean, and conservation district a lot of materials that they can share with you for that. So they're not always, depending on which county you're in, they're not always in there that's an expert in like sustainable production, but they generally have a lot of materials we'll try to find for you, and it's actually there as university extension. So I know in Maryland we have some great grazing specialists. Amanda Greb is one. So if you're in Maryland and looking for someone, she's great. And there's also the Mountains to Bay Grazing Alliance. They have great resources. They're an alliance led by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and they put out a great newsletter. Oh, okay. I'm going to turn my video off, see if that helps with the connection. But yeah, if you're looking for kind of a community of people in the grazing world, the Mountains to Bay Grazing Alliance is a great group to kind of follow along to, and they send out a really great newsletter every week. And there is, I believe there's a mentoring project as a part of that too. They can hook you up with a really experienced grazer to kind of guide you. So lots of good resources out there.
This has been great. Oh, no, I thought we lost you for a second. I didn't realize. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any, it's already almost 7:30. So does anyone else have any last minute questions or anything like that?
Hey, Lisa, one of them I had up earlier was, is there a refractometer you recommend, or just Google something?
I would just Google something. I mean, I got one that I just kind of picked one off the internet, and it was great. Yeah, I don't know of any particular brand. My rule with some of that is never pick the cheapest and never pick the most expensive. As a rule of thumb. So the Bionutrient Association does have one that they recommend. I could try to look it up real quick. They've been working on it, developing one for a while. Let's see. But in general, I would if you're interested in learning more about that work and using a spectrometer or doing Brix testing, I would poke around on their website. So I'm going to pop that in the chat. I also popped my email in the chat in case more questions come up, or just so you have it as you get your soil tests back or think more about what cover crop mixtures you might want to use, or systems, ways to set up a no-till kind of situation if that's what you're interested in doing. I I was just at the Delmarva Soil Summit for the last couple of days, and there's a farmer, Daniel Mays of Frith Farm up in Maine, was there presenting. He has a really great no-till system that he uses on about 3 acres. Really, really beautiful. So I'd recommend looking at his site as well. He has a book too, but I haven't read it yet, so I can't necessarily recommend it.
So I have some handouts that I got from Virginia Tech. Their soil health handouts. I am in the process right now of adding them all to your student resources folder as well for this cohort. And so you should be able to access those in the next, I have terrible internet, so in the next 5 minutes or so, they should be uploaded for you. And it's some interesting priorities of soil health management, just very basic stuff. I believe Dr. Mary Sketch's information is there. Yes. Eric Benfeld, who actually was previously a board member for Future Harvest, and Mary Sketch and I got together 2 weeks ago now, and they provided me with some handouts for y'all. And so there's just some reference materials that will be in there for quick, kind of like quick lookup, and also their contact information as well if you want some more in-depth information.
Yeah, I would say just the soil health principles. And probably most importantly is, soil biology drives everything. Life drives life. So, keeping living roots in the soil for as much of the year as possible should always be kind of in the back of your mind as the holy grail of soil health. That's where all the action happens, is when you've got above ground life feeding below ground life and kind of engaging in that cycle. Photosynthesis drives all of the below ground action. So it's a reciprocal relationship, and just to make it all in one step. Keep things growing whenever you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know that you're talking a little bit about no-till. It is not for the faint of heart, but I would never go back. And there is some carbon released when we do our prescribed burns here, but not as much as when you're tilling. And it's worth it. Just in respect to what Lisa just mentioned about keeping as much going on below the surface as possible. One of the most important things that you could possibly do. Especially, I don't know who it was that had asked in the first place about beefing up volume of organic matter. But if you do need to eradicate those pesky weed seeds like pigweed, burning instead of tilling is great for killing all those seeds off. But man, definitely try to keep as much going under the ground as possible.
Yeah, and something to keep in mind there too. And I used a weed dragon a lot, the flame dragon. You just have to be careful in the summer if you've got dry matter on the ground. It can run away from you. You need someone like a spotter ready to stamp out any little fires that are happening where you're not intending them.
Definitely.
But something
and don't go getting arrested. Make sure you follow fire code wherever you're at.
Yeah. But like something we don't always think about because we don't see it, we look at the above ground biomass that's happening. We look at the green that's happening on top of the ground, but a lot of the action is happening with the roots. So what's going on above ground is also happening below ground. And that's where a lot of the biomass that you're building is happening. The roots are constantly growing and dying off and creating channels down through the soil for water and nutrients and pulling nutrients up. And so don't underestimate what's happening with the roots of the plant below the
Oh,
surface. Not
before
all
you
about-
go, there was a question about
Mhm.
opinions on cardboard box cover.
Yeah, I think you can totally, like, depending on what your scale you're at, if you can get a good amount of cardboard and use that instead of tillage to just smother out the weeds, I think that's totally a good option. Just, sometimes it takes some work removing all the softened tape and stuff like that that you gotta remove first. But yeah, I
We
like it.
used that at the MLK Urban Agriculture Center to establish our growing area, and liquor store boxes are great, but they're not very big. The clutch thing for me was getting a relationship with a local bicycle shop because they're really big boxes that they're shipped in, and they want to get rid of all of them. So it's so much
Yeah.
easier. You know what I mean? It's like economy of
Yeah.
scale, I guess.
Maybe a refrig someplace, like, I don't know what the box stores do, but boxes, refrigerators and stuff come in. I mean, uh, that'd be a great resource. But any
I
kind of material like wood chips, I mean, you want to scope out what's available in your region. Like, can you get wood chips delivered for free?
Yes,
To
you
use as
can.
mulch, like leaves. I mean, I honestly, I got more wood chips than I could handle.
I just ordered 20 cubic yards. I just put the link in there and it's free.
So have you had success with them?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
'cause
actually use that for the MLK Urban Agriculture Center as well.
I've
oh,
had success with them in Maryland also.
on the Eastern Shore where I am, I have not had success with them, but I have just been able to call tree companies, and when they're in the area, like, they would rather dump them at my place than drive them to the landfill and pay to dump them. So I've gotten, more wood chips than I knew what to do with, just by contacting tree services.
Yeah, we've had similar experiences. You, Lisa. Dewey's been able to reach out and establish relationships with a couple of the local wood chip guys, but nobody has responded to our enrollment in the wood chip drop.
Mm.
What do you say? So I've never called any place directly. How do you even start that conversation? Just curious.
Hey,
Well,
Amy
for
Rose, it's
us,
Dewey.
go ahead.
I literally walked over to where they were chipping and said, "Who's in charge?" and said, "Hey, where do you dump your wood chips? Because I'm willing to take some, and I know that most of you guys have to pay for it." And the guy was like, "Hey, I do have to pay for it. There's one guy that'll take some. Where do you want me to drop them at?" I said, "Turn around and look right there." And he goes, "What's that?" I said, "Well, right through those trees, that's my farm." And he goes, "That's really close. That's closer than the Scottsville drive I have to take." And I said, "Yep." And I said, I prefer hardwood and oak. And that afternoon I got one load, and then I got 2 loads a couple days later. And I actually contacted him today because I went through his 3 loads and I said, "I really need another load, any chance?" And at the end of the day, a 1-ton truck showed up and dumped another load.
That's amazing.
So
Oh, that was really loud. Sorry. I have no idea why I've got echo going on here.
Well,
Um,
because Dewey was
Yeah.
talking, we could hear you through him.
yeah, Amy Rose, the other thing I would tell people is there's a lot of those sites out there where we're at. There's a I don't know, I can't remember the name of it. Lake Monticello has a site where they
Neighborhood.
Yeah, well, you have neighborhood, and you have a site where you like a yard sale site or whatever site where you can pick stuff up. And sometimes people just post on there. And because I will tell you, especially for the neighborhood, Barbara can explain that one, especially for the neighborhood, there's always tree guys. There's all sorts of tree guys that are on there that are, willing to, sell you a service to come and cut a tree down. Well, they got to get rid of that stuff somewhere. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that wisdom with us. That's great.
And one of those sites I use is on Facebook.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you guys. So
some
much.
people are more comfortable with Facebook. Some people are more comfortable with neighborhood. Some people, I think it's, just whatever their comfort level is. And if we want to market ourselves or we want to communicate with them, it's like talking to our kids. how does your kid best communicate? That's how you talk to them. It's not how you want to communicate, just like marketing. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that everyone was so engaged and Lisa was able to share so much wisdom. She is extremely knowledgeable on these things. So I hope you guys took notes.
I got one more question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The
I'm
floor is
sorry,
yours.
late one. I actually just like right before this, there was another online conference thing and I kind of spurred the question kind of a thing. It sounds like there's some like increasing level of popularity of doing like low cover crops in aisles. That or aged wood chips, which is going to be better, kind of a situation.
Oh, to keep a like a living mulch in your pathways. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, basically, so I'm going to open up this new area and I'm going to actually have like legit aisles, and I do not want them to be full of weeds for obvious reasons. And so I'm not sure if it's better to use aged wood chips, which will then get mixed in anyways over the course of time. They've been aging for quite a long time, so they shouldn't be grabbing my nitrogen. Or do I try to do a like low cover crop kind of a situation and let it be green?
Yeah. I mean, I think I love the idea of living pathways, but they will always be creeping into your beds.
Okay.
So it's going to be like it will be a management issue. I mean, I think it's great, but you have to think about, there's going to be other kinds of weeds are going to make their way in there. You're going to have to think about how you're going to either mow them or weed
Wood
whack
chip
them.
sounds like the starting spot for the first year or two, or at least let me figure out what I'm doing first.
Yeah, I really love the wood chips. And if you're making raised beds at all, then the wood chips kind of help keep the shape of, you really fill them to almost, as deep as your bed height. And that kind of helps keep the shape of your bed as well. But you're always going to have to add to them, because they are going to be breaking down. And but I love wood chip paths. I'm a big fan.
Excellent. Perfect. If you're saying, as much as you love cover crop, if you're saying wood chips are good, are okay for the pathways, I'm doing that.
Okay. Let's see.
Awesome. Oh, wait a minute.
Can I ask one question about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, so Lisa, I was told, some article I read, I can't remember what it was for the wood chips, to use hardwood as opposed to the pines, because the pines have something in them that until they break down, whatever that was. Go ahead, honey.
They have jugalone in them, which deters anything else from growing, underneath the pine tree. And until it leaches out or evaporates, breaks down in the pine, that it will also deter anything from growing in the pathways.
I guess, any thoughts or comments on that? Or Amy?
Well, I actually don't think you want anything to grow in the pathways.
Right. So you can't use it as a mulch, but you could use it in the pathways.
Yeah. I mean, I spread a lot of wood chips in my pathways, and I'm on the Eastern Shore where there was probably a lot of loblolly pine. I'm sure it wasn't all loblolly pine. I'm sure it was a mixture, probably in most cases, a mixture of pine and, both soft and hardwoods. Personally, never had a problem with any kind of inhibiting growth within the beds.
Because Lisa, I'm still doing it because I don't have a choice. I get what I can get to put in there. But my only concern was sometimes me and Barbara plant, within like 2 inches of the edge, and I was just worried about that. Over. I haven't heard, I don't have any personal experience with anyone that's had a problem with that. And I haven't, but I also don't want, I don't want to
discount anybody else's experience with that or steer you in the wrong direction. So
You're
I
not
don't-
steering me in the wrong direction. I'm doing it anyway because I'm getting
Okay.
what chips I can get. So I just was curious.
yeah, I haven't had a problem with it in the past. That said, straw mulch, straw in the paths is also wonderful. The only thing is for me, I always had to purchase the straw. So not like a free resource that I could just go pick up.
Yeah, my only issue with the straw also, Lisa, is I have yet to get any straw that we have purchased that has come without its own abundance of seed.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so we did this year experiment and it seems to be going okay. We first spread straw on our garlic beds and then we spent a couple hours on our knees weeding as it germinated. But then we gave the straw to our chickens to scratch through. And then after Dewey moved the chickens, we went and raked it up and then put it on. We've got one bed of saffron crocuses growing this year. And we haven't seen any germination there, but I don't know if it's because the chickens took care of the problem or if we timed it just right that right now they're dormant. So we'll let y'all know in the spring, but I have not found good quality straw in our area.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the same experience with weeds growing in my straw. The only benefit really is that weeding the seeds from the straw is generally better than whatever weed I'm going to get by leaving the ground uncovered. So like I have found that with with a hoe, you can kind of just, rather than hand weeding, you can kind of just undercut through the straw a little bit and uproot the wheat generally that's coming through in kind of a swift movement. So it's generally like preferable to whatever weed's going to happen if you leave the soil bare.
So what I did with the straw was put a little bit of cardboard down, and then I mixed up my straw mixture from the pig and goat bedding in between my garlic beds with wine cap mushroom spores. And then I kind of made it and then I put it on super heavy. So it did double duty in holding that cardboard down without having to worry about the wind blowing it away. You know, layered on there with all that straw, because Lisa's right. It does come with a lot of unwanted guests, I guess I'll call it that.
Yeah,
And,
that sounds awesome, Amy Rose. And Dewey and I are going to pick your brain this spring because I have a refrigerator full of mushroom spawn that we just bought.
I was going to say, actually, one of the subsequent subject matter experts will be the woman that taught me that trick. She used to live up here near us, and she has unfortunately gone to North Carolina, but she'll be joining us on Zoom. And it worked like wonders. And my children love mushrooms. So it was, you know, kind of threefold benefit of that.
Yeah,
but definitely Lisa's right. It does come with a lot of seeds, so layer it on thick.
Yeah, and so for those of you who are curling your nose at the thought of eating mushrooms, until I met Dewey and started eating fresh mushrooms, I thought the only mushrooms that there were those canned things that are absolutely nasty and I will not touch.
Gross.
I love mushrooms now, but they have to be fresh. So if you've never had fresh mushrooms, don't knock it until you've tried it. So we will be growing them.
Oh, another thing about the straw is that actually if you let it get wet, like if you wait a little while before using it and you let it get wet once, then sometimes the seed will just germinate and then it'll be dead after that. So that's another, if you have a little bit of time before spreading it, that's another way to get rid of some of the weed seeds.
Oh yes, so if you like, I use animal bedding, and you know, pigs are great because they go outside to go to the bathroom. Goats, not so much. So definitely make sure you age that. As Lisa was saying, I am too impatient for waiting to let it get wet. So when I'm spreading it in between layers over a couple of days, I will hose it down, put some on, hose it down, put some on, and do that for about 3 or 4 days when it's mixed up with those wine cap spores. And I mean, it's great for not having to wait until it rains, and I'm impatient. So, you know, it is what it is.
Well, that actually makes a lot more sense to just wet it down. I guess mine was much more like benign neglect. Leave it sitting.
Oh my gosh. It's funny that you say it's benign neglect because I am just lazy and impatient. So I'm like, I'm going to get this done right now. And my children actually forage mushrooms too. And we, you know, sometimes my little guy who's only 7, and he has generally really great judgment, but sometimes things are too far gone, but he wants to pick it anyway. So the things that are too far gone, when I'm sorting through the mushrooms that he has foraged out of the woods here, I will throw those in with the hay too. So I get like happy little bolettes. I'm channeling Bob Ross here. Happy little bolettes and happy little indigo milk caps and things like that by mixing it in with all of that straw, and they love it as long as you keep it moist. But like Lisa was saying when she was talking about Lespedeza, and you want to do that towards late summer, early fall, that trick only works late summer, early fall. Like I wouldn't try that trick until the end of July, early August at the very soonest.
Right,
But
because
it's
you need a certain amount of moisture, right? So you don't want it
Yeah.
to sit there and dry out and get cooked.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to, because it's not going to work. It's like that naturalist, right plant, right place philosophy. So can't force it. You just got to go with the flow. Nature is boss, and mama always will prevail.
So I think that I'm Amy Rose, is it 2 weeks from now that I'm coming back, joining the group again?
Let me double check. So I think you're in group 1. So of course, everyone is welcome to come back again for next week. So Lisa will, Lisa will be here on the 15th as well. So if you guys noodle over this content and have any good questions, the level 1 cohort will be joining us next Tuesday from 6 to 8 with Joanna. And you're more than welcome to come in. Everyone has the link in the spreadsheet. And so if you have any good juicy questions that might be beneficial to everyone else, please come back. There's no, no borders on these meetings. Everybody's welcome to come anytime. And so we'll be back in a week with Lisa. And then in 2 weeks, y'all will have, sorry, I'm having to look at my calendar. Oh, Lisa, you're switched up with Elizabeth Gabriel. I apologize. So on the 22nd, it will be Elizabeth Gabriel. But Lisa will be here next week, and we'll see you soon. This was a great conversation. You guys had really great questions. I hope that you took notes. If you did not take notes, this is recorded, and as soon as it's processed, I will get it uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you guys can go back and reference it as you need to.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions and for being here. And you know where to find me.
Oh, there's many thanks coming through to you, Lisa. Yeah, and I hope that you all take everything that Lisa had to offer you today with the extreme value that it has, because she is incredibly knowledgeable and really a leader in her field. And please check out her website, millionacrechallenge.org. And if you're in Maryland, please sign up. If you're not in Maryland, please sign up and then just click other instead of your county. And I hope you guys get to connect. Thank y'all. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Lisa.